Imagine this. You park your car in your own driveway, just like you've done 100 times before. It's late. You're tired after a long shift. You're ready to get inside, relax, maybe grab a snack, maybe take a shower. But instead of peace and quiet, you get someone banging on your door. And not just anyone, it's that one neighbor. The one who thinks she's the president of the world just because she's on the HOA board. You open the door and there she is, standing with that same smug expression you've seen way too many times. She's pointing toward your car. Your work car. The one with the lights on top. The one that literally says police across the side. And you just know something ridiculous is about to come out of her mouth. She starts in on some rant about how your vehicle is violating HOA rules. How it can't be parked in a residential area overnight. She's going on about property values and neighborhood image. You're barely listening at this point because you've had a long day, and this is the last thing you expected to deal with when you got home. You try to stay calm, but you're also wondering, does she even realize who she's talking to? But here's the best part. She doesn't. She has no idea you're not just a homeowner. You're not just someone who lives here and pays dues like everybody else. You're a police officer. And not only is she confronting you over a made-up issue, she's about to make things way worse for herself. Because instead of backing off or walking away, she decides to take it a step further. She pulls out her phone. Right there on your front lawn. She dials 911 and reports a suspicious vehicle parked in the driveway. Your driveway. She uses phrases like official-looking car and an authorized emergency vehicle. She even throws in something about the car being a threat to the neighborhood. You're standing there watching this unfold like it's a reality show, and honestly, it's so over the top it's almost funny. Except it's real. You're calm. You don't interrupt. You let her talk. You know how this is going to end, and she clearly doesn't. So you wait. She finishes her call and stands there like she just saved the neighborhood. Like she's the hero who stood up to some villain trying to ruin her peaceful little street. Meanwhile, you're thinking, she just called the cops on a cop. In a cop car. In his own driveway. You step back inside. You don't need to argue with her. You know what's coming next. A few minutes go by. Then, right on cue, a patrol car pulls into the street. Lights off. Calm response. A couple of officers step out and walk up. Karen turns to them, full of confidence. She starts repeating everything she just said on the phone. She points to your car, then points to your house. The officers let her finish. Then they look at each other. Then they look at you. And their faces shift, recognition. One of them even smirks. Because they know you. You've worked with them. You've probably even trained one of them. You step outside slowly, casual, like this is just another Tuesday night. And Karen. She freezes. You can almost hear the gears turning in her head. The confusion. The realization. The oh no moment hitting her like a brick wall. Her mouth opens, but no words come out. She doesn't know what to say anymore. The confidence is gone. The smugness melts away. The officers greet you by name. Ask how your shift went. Maybe even laugh a little. One of them turns back to her and says something like, this officer has every right to park his cruiser here. This is his home. You don't have to say a word. The look on her face says it all. And just like that, the tone shifts. The situation is no longer about HOA rules or neighborhood image. It's about someone who tried to flex power they didn't really have, and got caught in the act. What she didn't know is that you've been dealing with people like her for years. People who feel entitled. Who think rules apply to everyone else but not to them. You've seen it all before. But this one's going to be a story worth telling. Because what happens next? Well, let's just say things don't exactly go the way Karen expected. It all started when you moved into what seemed like a quiet, well-kept neighborhood. The kind of place where everyone waves politely, lawns are trimmed to perfection, and mailboxes are all the same shape and size. That kind of neighborhood. Everything looked peaceful on the surface. But it didn't take long to notice the cracks. There was one person who made sure everyone followed the rules a little too closely. The one who handed out warnings like Halloween candy. The one who treated the HOA guidelines like the Ten Commandments. Everyone knew her, but not in a good way. They whispered her name like it was a threat. Careful, or Karen will report you. At first, you figured she was just overly enthusiastic. Maybe too bored. Maybe too retired. She sent out emails for the smallest things, garden hoses left out, trash cans placed a few inches off the mark, a kid's basketball hoop leaning too far toward the sidewalk. She wasn't just on the HOA board. She was the HOA. The funny part is, she never introduced herself like a normal neighbor. No friendly knock on the door. No welcome basket. Just a printed letter, in bold font, sealed in a plastic sleeve, telling you your grass needed to be half an inch shorter. That was your first real interaction with her. And that was just the beginning. You heard stories from other neighbors. Someone got cited for having wind chimes that were too loud. Another got warned for parking their RV on their own property for more than 48 hours, even though they were cleaning it out for a family trip. One guy had a political sign in his yard for 2 hours, and she reported him twice. People started calling her the neighborhood watchdog, but not in a respectful way. The worst part. She didn't just stick to writing letters or sending emails. She walked around the neighborhood with a notepad. She took photos. She made phone calls. You'd see her squinting from her front window, probably zooming in on someone's recycling bin to make sure it wasn't placed out the night before collection. You figured if you kept to yourself, stayed quiet, followed the rules, you'd avoid her radar. But even that didn't work. When you brought home your police cruiser for the first time, you already knew it might attract some attention. It's not exactly subtle, flashing lights, decals, radio antenna, the whole package. But it's your work vehicle. It's legal. It's registered. You're allowed to park it in your driveway. There's no law or HOA rule that says you can't. You parked it late one night after a long shift. Didn't think much of it. Walked inside, kicked off your boots, and settled in. The next morning, there it was, another printed letter in a plastic sleeve taped to your door. This time it was about non-residential vehicles creating visual disruption. You almost laughed. You knew exactly who sent it. No signature, of course. Just HOA board member. You ignored it. You knew your rights. But the letters kept coming. And then the looks. You'd catch her outside, watching from across the street. Sometimes pretending to walk her dog, but not really walking it. Just standing. Staring. Always with that notebook. One day, she actually approached you while you were cleaning the windshield. She tried to sound polite, but her tone was sharp. She asked why you insist on parking the cruiser at home. You explained. Calmly. You told her it was department policy, and you were well within your rights. She didn't like that answer. Her eyes narrowed. She mentioned something about neighborhood standards. You mentioned state law. She didn't say much after that. Just turned and walked away. You thought that would be the end of it. But that's not how Karen works. She started complaining to other neighbors. Stirring up conversations. Spreading nonsense about how emergency vehicles lower property values or make people feel unsafe. Which is ironic, because your presence probably increased safety in the area. But logic didn't seem to be her strong suit. Still, you didn't escalate. You kept doing your job. You parked respectfully. No lights flashing, no sirens, nothing disruptive. Just a normal officer coming home after a long shift. But of course, to someone like Karen, the rules don't matter if she doesn't asterisk them. And that's what brought her to your door that one night, phone in hand, ready to call 911 on someone who literally is 911. And from that moment on, things were no longer just annoying. They were about to get interesting. It was a Friday evening. One of those long, exhausting days when all you want to do is get home, drop everything, and just breathe. You pulled into your driveway like always. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just quietly parking your cruiser in your spot, the same way you've done 100 times before. Nothing unusual. Nothing out of place. But as you stepped out of the car, you felt that familiar stare. You didn't even have to look. You just knew. Sure enough, across the street, there she was. Karen. Arms crossed, lips tight, phone in hand. Watching. Again. You didn't engage. You didn't wave. You didn't even make eye contact. You just walked to your door and went inside. If she had something to say, she could say it. But of course, that's not how she operated. About 10 minutes later, you heard a knock. Not just a polite knock, more like the kind someone uses when they're already mad. You opened the door, and there she was, already mid-sentence. You can't keep parking that thing here, she snapped. You blinked. No hello. No introduction. Just straight into full HOA mode. You calmly replied, "It's my vehicle. It's allowed. You know that." She didn't want to hear it. She started quoting imaginary rules. Something about how emergency vehicles weren't permitted to park permanently in driveways. You tried explaining, for the third or fourth time, that the HOA guidelines didn't say that. That her complaint had no basis. That the vehicle is marked, licensed, insured, and more than legal to be where it is. She didn't care. Instead of continuing the argument, you turned around and walked back inside. You weren't going to waste your energy. If she had a problem, she could take it to the HOA. You were done talking. And apparently, that's when she decided it was time for the big move. You didn't even know she'd done it until you saw the flashing lights reflecting through your front blinds. For a second, your brain went into cop mode. Asterisk, what's going on? Is someone hurt? Asterisk, but then you realized they weren't there for anyone else. They were there for asterisk you star. You stepped outside and saw two officers walking up your front path. Professional. Calm. Clearly not in a rush. But behind them, there she was. Karen, standing off to the side, arms folded again, clearly proud of what she'd done. She had actually called the police. On a police officer. About a police car. You waited while the officers approached. One of them glanced at you, did a double take, and then smiled. "Oh," he said, chuckling. "Hey, man." You nodded. "Evening. Everything all right?" The second officer turned and looked back at Karen, then back at you. "We got a call about a suspicious vehicle. I'm guessing this is yours." You looked at your own cruiser, still parked exactly how it should be. "Yeah," you said. "It's mine. Been here for months." The first officer scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, we figured. But once a call comes in, we've got to respond." Karen walked over, still trying to hold on to some sense of authority. "I just don't think it's right," she said loudly. "It's not fair to the rest of us. That vehicle makes this place look like a crime zone. People are uncomfortable. It shouldn't be allowed here." You could tell the officers were trying not to laugh. They'd probably heard worse, but the absurdity of the moment wasn't lost on them. One of them turned to Karen and said, Here's a police officer. That's a department-issued vehicle. There's nothing illegal or improper about it being here." Karen's voice jumped an octave. "Well, then the HOA should change the rules." You could feel the shift in the air. The officers were done with this. One of them gave her a polite but firm nod and said, "We're not the HOA. We're the police. And this isn't a police matter." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She looked from the cruiser, to the badge on your chest, to the officers in front of her. And in that split second, it finally clicked. She had wasted everyone's time, and exposed herself in the process. You didn't gloat. You didn't say, "I told you so." You just stood there, letting the silence do all the work. The officers gave you a respectful nod, made a few jokes about how they should have brought popcorn, and then walked back to their vehicle. Karen stayed behind for a moment, speechless, clutching her phone like it could undo everything that just happened. She didn't say a word as the officers pulled away. Just stood there with that look, half embarrassment, half disbelief. Like she couldn't process what just happened. She had called the police expecting backup, thinking they'd scold you, maybe even tow your cruiser. But instead, they greeted you like an old friend and shut her down without even raising their voices. You walked back inside, closed the door, and let out a deep breath. You weren't angry. You weren't surprised. But you were tired. Tired of the drama. Tired of being targeted for something so ridiculous. Tired of being the subject of someone's personal power trip. But you figured maybe, just maybe that would be the end of it. After all, she had gone as far as calling 911, and it completely blew up in her face. Any reasonable person would take the hint and let it go. But this wasn't a reasonable person. The next day, there was another letter. This time, it was taped to your mailbox, even though that was technically illegal. It was written in all caps. You could tell she was angry just by the punctuation. Underlined sentences, highlighted text, vague threats about further action. She claimed your vehicle was disturbing the harmony of the neighborhood. She wrote that the optics of a police car gave off a sense of danger. As if people would drive by and assume something criminal was happening just because your cruiser was there. You didn't respond. Later that week, you found out she had gone to the HOA board with a formal complaint. Tried to rally other residents to her cause. She printed flyers. Yes, actual printed flyers. Slipped them into mailboxes. Claimed you were creating a hostile environment. Said the HOA had the right to enforce new parking restrictions. Called it a community safety matter. But this time, it didn't go how she planned. Most of the neighbors didn't agree with her. Some had their own stories about her behavior. One neighbor mentioned how Karen once threatened to report them for putting up Halloween decorations too early. Another said she measured the height of his fence with a ruler while he was at work. People were tired of it. Tired of the notes, the rules, the spying, the constant complaining. Your situation became the last straw. Several residents spoke up. Some even reached out to you directly. They told you to ignore her. Told you they supported you. Some even said they felt safer with your cruiser parked there, not less. At the next HOA meeting, Karen showed up prepared to argue her case. She had printouts, a speech, and a stack of neighborhood photos. She even tried to play the victim, saying she felt threatened and disrespected. But what she didn't expect was that the board had already talked to the police department. And the department had made it very clear that there was nothing illegal or inappropriate about you parking your official vehicle at home. The board couldn't overrule that. They had no authority to ban it. No legal ground to stand on. One of the board members calmly told her the issue was closed. That she had no case. That continuing to harass a neighbor over something lawful could itself be considered harassment. Karen didn't take it well. She stormed out of the meeting halfway through. Said the board was biased. Accused them of being unprofessional. But by then, her influence was already fading. People saw her for what she was, someone obsessed with control, not community. Over the next few weeks, things got quieter. Fewer notes. Fewer glares. The tension in the air started to lift. Neighbors started talking to each other more. A few even started talking about replacing her on the board at the next election. Whether that would happen or not wasn't clear, but the fact that they were even saying it out loud said enough. As for your cruiser, it stayed right where it always was. No drama. No trouble. Just a car parked in a driveway, like it had been from the start. And while Karen might not have admitted she was wrong, she definitely stopped trying to prove she was right. The months that followed were noticeably different. The air felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, you could come home, park your cruiser, and not feel like you were being watched from behind a curtain. It was quiet. Calm. Almost like how the neighborhood was supposed to be before all the drama started. But even with things settling down, a part of you stayed alert. People like Karen don't just disappear, they simmer. You started noticing small changes around the neighborhood. People were speaking up more. The guy who never dared leave his trash bins out an extra hour. He stopped caring. The family down the block brought back their holiday decorations. Full display, lights, and all. Someone even painted their mailbox a bright color, and nobody said a word. It was like the spell had broken. And yet, even as the HOA board tried to move forward, Karen wasn't done. She didn't forget. She didn't let go. She just found new ways to express it. You'd see her walking her dog a little slower when she passed your house. Taking longer routes that just so happened to go right by your driveway every evening. Sometimes she wouldn't even look at you. Other times she stared just long enough to make her point. But she wasn't talking anymore. No more confrontations. No more letters. It was like she realized that every move she made now was being watched just as much as she used to watch others. There were whispers that she'd tried to file another complaint, this time with the city. But just like before, it didn't stick. The department stood behind you. The law was clear. And no amount of huffing and puffing was going to blow that down. Still, she tried. Maybe not as publicly, maybe not as loud, but you could feel it. She was still hoping to win some kind of invisible battle. Then one day, something unexpected happened. A delivery truck accidentally backed into a light post near the entrance to the neighborhood. It wasn't a huge deal, no one was hurt, just a little damage. But guess who was the first to show up, clipboard in hand, trying to direct traffic and question witnesses? You watched from a distance as she tried to take over the situation, telling the driver where to stand, trying to get other cars to back up, even trying to call the city herself. She was in full HOA savior mode. But no one was having it. A younger neighbor, someone who had only recently moved in, walked over and calmly asked her to step aside. He said the police were already on their way, and that she didn't need to get involved. Karen, clearly not used to being dismissed, started raising her voice. Said she was just trying to help, and that this used to be a respectable neighborhood. You stepped out of your house and slowly walked over, not in uniform, not with any authority, just as a neighbor. You didn't say anything. Just stood nearby. She saw you and froze for a second. Maybe she thought you were going to intervene. Maybe she expected you to call her out in front of everyone. But instead, you just looked at the damaged post and asked the driver if he was okay. That simple question, so calm, so direct, did more than anything else could have. It reminded everyone, including Karen, that while she was busy trying to play boss, you were focused on what actually mattered. Real people. Real safety. Real issues. Karen stepped back, said nothing, and walked away. No clipboard. No comments. Just silence. That day, something shifted again. Not just for you, but for the whole neighborhood. People saw the contrast. One person chasing control, the other simply doing what needed to be done. Over the next few weeks, there were more friendly faces. More waves. More little conversations at the mailbox. Karen became more of a background presence. Still there, still walking that same little dog, but no longer the loudest voice in the room. Her reign had ended, not with a fight, but with a slow, steady fade. You didn't gloat. You didn't brag. You just kept showing up, doing your job, living your life. The cruiser stayed parked. The neighborhood stayed quiet. And slowly, everyone learned the difference between enforcing rules and simply being a good neighbor.